the most threatened places to live in U.S. due to climate change. Nearly half of all homes in the U.S. are currently at risk from extreme weather conditions, with approximately $22 trillion in residential properties facing the potential for severe or extreme damage. From relentless droughts and record-breaking floods to the threat of deadly wildfires, these risks go beyond headlines and affect millions of Americans daily. In this video, we'll take a closer look at regions in the U.S. facing extreme risks that could make them increasingly unsafe for residents. The past few years have been particularly challenging for the U.S. in terms of climate change. In 2021 alone, the country experienced 20 climate-related disasters, each costing over $1 billion, according to NOAA. These disasters impacted American homes significantly, with about 1 in 10 homes affected. In total, over 14.5 million homes were damaged, resulting in approximately $57 billion in property losses. Winter storms were the worst offenders, particularly in the central U.S., where more than 12.7 million homes were hit, causing $15 billion in damages. Hurricanes followed closely behind in terms of devastation, accounting for $33 billion in damages in 2021, making them the second most destructive natural disaster. Wildfires, fueled by extreme heat and drought, caused another $1.5 billion in losses, with the Dixie Fire becoming California's second-largest wildfire in history, burning nearly 1 million acres. Fast forward to 2024, and the threat of climate change continues to grow. Hurricane Beryl wreaked havoc in Texas, unleashing over 50 tornadoes across eastern Texas, western Louisiana, and southern Arkansas. At the same time, wildfires raged through New Mexico, and Hurricanes Helene and Milton became some of the most costly storms in recent years. What's even more concerning is that the areas most vulnerable to climate change are also experiencing the highest population growth, putting more people in harm's way. As we continue, we'll explore the places most at risk from climate change, strategies to manage these risks, and the threats you need to be aware of moving forward. But to begin, let's establish some important context. One of the clearest signs of climate change during extreme weather events is the rising temperatures. Global warming is driving not just an increase in average temperatures, but also more frequent and intense heat waves. Currently, we're breaking heat records more often than ever before. In the southeast and southwest, regions already accustomed to high temperatures, things are expected to get much worse. Over the next 30 years, parts of Louisiana, Texas, and Florida could see more than 100 days a year where temperatures surpass 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius. Even more concerning, by 2053, areas that have never experienced temperatures over 125 degrees might start seeing at least one such day annually. These extreme temperatures pose serious dangers. A prolonged power outage during a heat wave at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, 51.7 degrees Celsius, could be catastrophic, leading to widespread fatalities. We're already seeing the warmest summers, winters, and years on record, and this trend is only going to continue. The reality is that these extreme heat events will become more frequent, but we will come back to that in a moment. Many people assume a warming world means less water, but the reality is more complicated. As the planet heats up, the atmosphere can hold 7% more moisture for every degree of warming. While the Southwest may become drier, much of the U.S. is expected to see more rainfall on average. However, it's the extreme weather events that really impact people. A 2024 study showed that extreme precipitation events will worsen as the climate warms. Currently, 53 million people live in high-risk areas, but with just 2 degrees of warming, that number could double. What this means is that we'll experience both more intense rainfall and faster evaporation, depending on local conditions. So, paradoxically, we may see more rain and more drought. And while it's harder to model, hurricanes and wildfires are already causing catastrophic damage in our warming world. In the last decade alone, wildfires have caused hundreds of billions in damages in the west and southeast, and hurricanes have devastated coastal communities. Meanwhile, rising sea levels threaten the entire eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast. Yet, the impact of these hazards is not felt equally by all. This brings us to the critical question: where are the areas most at risk, and is there anything that can be done to protect them? As extreme weather increases all over the country, how do we figure out the riskiest places? First, let's examine the predictions for floods, storms, wildfires, drought, and heat risks across the United States. We'll review data from the Rhodium Group and ProPublica, starting with the most localized hazard: flooding. This report identifies the number of homes that could be affected by future floods due to rainfall, overflowing rivers, rising tides, and storm surges. Many coastal towns will be hit hard by rising sea levels, and states like West Virginia will see heavier rainfall as the climate heats up. Redfin's analysis suggests that by 2050, 84% of properties in Cape Coral, Florida, and 98% in New Orleans will face flood risks. Houston also stands out because of the large number of properties endangered, as seen during Hurricane Harvey's historic flooding in 2017. And what about storms? These extreme rainstorms appear to be causing increasing damage as global temperatures rise. The top 10 cities impacted by storms include Seattle, Portland, Louisville, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Lexington, Raleigh, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Boston. Most of these cities are in the Northeast, but Seattle and Portland, two cities known for their rain, are also on the list. Turning to wildfire risk, we see a major shift to the west and southeast. The study shows that in 2050, wildfire risk will be greatest in homes near wildlands rather than in urban areas. It's not just forests at risk, but also the dry grasslands and shrublands of places like the Great Basin. Next, let's talk about drought. The data shows a decline in rainfall over the last 30 years compared to the 20th century. Looking ahead to 2050, the top 5 cities facing drought include Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Diego, Colorado Springs, and San Antonio. 4 of these cities rely on the drought-stricken Colorado River, where significant water cuts are expected in the near future. Lastly, let's discuss heat, the second biggest cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S. This study predicts the number of days over 100 degrees in 2053. Florida, Texas, and Arizona will see extreme heat, with Phoenix facing the highest temperatures. However, Florida's humidity makes the heat especially dangerous since it hampers the body's ability to cool down through sweat. Looking at the combined risks of all these climate threats, it's clear that the Southeast is poised to suffer the most from climate change. Before we continue, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell to stay updated with our future videos. To figure out which parts of the United States are most at risk from climate change, we need to look at 3 main factors: hazards, exposure, and vulnerability. The potential hazards in question include heat waves, cold snaps, intense rainfall, and droughts, each of which can profoundly impact communities. Exposure refers to how much people, infrastructure, and resources are impacted by these extreme events. For instance, exposure is high in urban spaces like Metro Atlanta, Dallas, Miami, Southern Florida, parts of the Southwest, and LA. Urban areas often come up in these discussions, as their crowded conditions can lead to more severe effects during climate events. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is all about which groups are most at risk. Research shows that the communities of color, the elderly, young children, and those living in poverty often face the biggest challenges. Let's quickly look at Florida's situation, which is becoming increasingly alarming. Not only is the state highly vulnerable to rising sea levels and scorching heat, but it also has an older population that's especially at risk. Humans can only live comfortably within a certain temperature and humidity range, and when those limits are crossed, the danger escalates. We're now seeing stretches of days and even weeks where the heat and humidity together exceed what's tolerable for humans, posing serious risks. And don't forget, this isn't just about the people. The infrastructure, especially in areas packed with petrochemical industries, is also at severe risk. All these threats combined paint a very concerning picture. Aside from Florida, which has faced significant impacts this year, many of the other high-risk regions are also seeing a rise in population. What's driving people to move from secure parts of the country to riskier areas? Many are relocating from these climate-resilient areas primarily for financial reasons. On one side, affordability is a big factor. Individuals are moving away from the West Coast and East Coast, where home prices have surged significantly. People certainly wish to live in the most climate-resilient regions. Take San Francisco, for instance. It enjoys a mild climate and doesn't face threats from hurricanes or severe droughts. However, many are being pushed out of that city into areas of inland California that are more prone to wildfires, largely due to the housing shortage. So, while people care about climate resilience, financial considerations ultimately drive their decisions, specifically the ability to afford a home. In fact, the top 5 cities experiencing population loss are all very pricey coastal locations. Another notably safe area is the Midwest, often referred to as the Rust Belt. Yet, people are leaving this region for different reasons. It's not that housing is unaffordable there. Rather, individuals are departing due to a lack of job opportunities, as they struggle to find positions that offer the income needed for their desired standard of living. Consequently, they seek out areas with better economic prospects. What does it say about our country when people are forced to move to riskier areas instead of away from them? It highlights that a significant part of the solution lies in access to information. Our instincts are designed to react quickly, like dodging a bus or escaping from a tiger, but we're not wired to recognize slow-moving dangers and gradual risks. This makes it challenging for us to grasp the cumulative nature of these threats. The more information consumers have, the more likely they are to change their behavior in response. Access to long-term hazard data is essential. Research shows that individuals who initially considered homes with high flood risks often shifted their focus to properties with half the risk once they were presented with that information. This indicates that informed choices can lead to tangible changes in behavior. The key takeaway for homeowners is the importance of preparation. By being proactive, we can potentially minimize damage. If homeowners become aware of their high flood risks, they might take steps to mitigate those risks, or even come together to urge local governments to enhance climate change preparedness. But, honestly, the biggest risk here is to people who can't afford to move, and it's a shame that we're not talking about that more. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments and watch our videos in the end screen.